Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Welcome back to my PhD project. Today I would like to tell you a little bit more about my plans for the PhD project and the steps I want to take in order to get a PhD position in the field of history of science. Alright, so I've actually got my document here in which I've written down some stuff that I want to get done. So when I was applying, I actually got a lot of helpful feedback from the people on the PhD position committees, and they outlined some stuff that I think is very helpful and some things that I want to work on. So there are actually 3 things here that I want to work on during the coming year. The first one is networking. So I think it's important for any job to have a good network. And one of the things that's very helpful, especially in academic circles, is that there are a lot of basically societies or academic circles that organize a lot of events where you can meet people, or in this case online events that are happening. And especially now with these online events, that means you can go to an event anywhere in the world. And so I have decided to join a couple of societies. So one of the societies I joined is a Dutch society called Gewina. And it's meant for especially the history of science and the history of knowledge, which is especially something I think is interesting because the history of knowledge is so connected to the history of religion and the history of museums and universities. And this is exactly the field that I'm interested in. And so I joined this society, and the society has regular meetings and just ways to connect with other people in this field, especially here in the Netherlands, which is very important to also kind of get it locally, so you have people that you can actually work with in the future. Another society that I joined is the British Society for the History of Science. This is just a huge player in the field that I want to work in, and they actually have a lot of online lectures nowadays, so that's very helpful as well for someone that doesn't live or work in England. It's very nice that you can kind of connect to people from all over the world in your field. And some of the helpful things that these societies have as well as newsletters that update you on, for example, new positions in the field, new research that's being done. Just everything that you kind of need to know to be able to be active in this field, you can get through these newsletters. As well as that these societies often have a paper that you get full of kind of the latest research that's being done. So you have both an idea of what kind of stuff it is that they're doing in this field, and also of course the kind of stuff that you can contribute. So one of the things that's great is that you can write articles for these journals and you can kind of get involved with them. And that networking part nowadays is kind of difficult because of everything being online. So on the one hand you can really easily go to these lectures, but on the other hand you can not as easily connect with everyone. So for now I'm leaving networking to kind of these societies and to the online part of things. And hopefully when things get a little bit better in society with the whole pandemic going on, hopefully after that I can also get a little bit more active, actually connecting to other people and other researchers. So the second step that I'm gonna take in order to boost my CV a little bit is I'm gonna write for a couple of blogs. So there are actually many blogs out there, and some of them are actually started by students or are connected to a university in some way. And these blogs often have just a wide call for papers or for articles in general. And they're much shorter, much more informal. You don't need as much work to get published on these blogs, but they can help you write for the kind of subjects that you're interested in. So there are actually a couple of blogs specifically for the things that I want to do. There's one called Trailblazers for the women in the field of archaeology, geology and paleontology, which is amazing, and actually in the middle of writing biographies for a couple of historical figures in the history of Dutch archaeology. So I think that's really cool, is because you have a very kind of easy way into getting your name out, and connecting it to the kind of topics that you're interested in researching. So the other blog that I'm looking at right now is Shells and Pebbles, which is a blog specifically about the history of science. And there's a wide topic of things that they're interested in. You can write about any of the sciences, and you can also, for example, do reviews of books in the specific field. So you have a very wide array of things that you can do, and you have complete freedom to just write about anything that you're interested in. So this is also a good way for me to kind of write down the things that I want to do in a PhD and just start writing about them and start getting my name out and start getting a little bit of more confidence in the topics that I want to talk about. So blogs are a very good way in kind of doing that practice step without having to go through all the trouble of getting something published in an academic journal. Though this is, in fact, step 3 is getting something published in an academic journal, and one of the things I'm doing for that is I'm using my master's thesis as the background for an article that I want to write and want to send to a couple of academic journals. So I have written a thesis about looking at the different kind of influences in the way that we approach nature and archaeological museums today. And one of those major influences, of course, the past, is the history of these collections and the history of nature and culture in museums in general. And I think this is a very good starting point, and everything that I've done for that thesis, all the research I've done, all the things I now know, all the literature I have on hand, I'm going to use as a stepping stone for my first article. So what I want to kind of do in this paper is give a history of nature and culture, or nature and archaeology, natural history and archaeology, in collections and museums throughout history. And I think my thesis is going to be a good point of origin for that, but I'm also going to have to look a little bit more into the history of natural history museums in general, and how those relate to the growth of the natural sciences in the 19th century. So I think for anyone who does want to get a paper published on their name in a scientific journal or an academic journal, is taking your thesis or another paper you've written in university already as a starting point will really help you, because you already have knowledge about the subject and you already have done a lot of the work. So kind of molding that into a publishable article is going to be a lot less work. And I know that some people actually publish their master's thesis already. I think in my case it's not really ready for publication yet, especially because I kind of want to tweak it a little bit to fit this goal that I have of my PhD of the history of science, where I want to go a little bit more. So I have to do some rewriting to kind of completely fit this goal that I'm going for. But I think it's a very smart move to kind of start with something that you already know a lot about if you're going to write an article for publishing. So the final step that I'm taking is also with regards to getting something published, but this time it's doing your own original research. And this can take many forms depending on kind of what kind of PhD you want to pursue. In my case, I want to pursue a PhD looking into the history of collections, museum collections. And that's exactly what I'm going to try to do in this coming year. So I want to do a research project where I am studying the history of a specific collection. So that I'm basically doing a trial run of what I want to do in my PhD. So what I've actually done is I have contacted a museum that I'm really interested in their collections. And I've just asked them if they have any collections they would like to have researched, that they want to know more about their history. And this has actually worked out pretty well. So I have contacted Naturalis, which is the National Museum for Natural History here in the Netherlands. And next week we're actually going to get together and see what the collections are that kind of need a little bit more social history research. So if there's a research project that you're really interested in, but there's really not a place offering any kind of space for you to do that, just ask. Because there are a lot of professionals out there that are really capable and have a lot of knowledge of how to do one of these projects, and they really value new people coming in and kind of giving their helping hand and giving their expertise and their new view on things. And if it doesn't work out with this particular museum, then there's so many more museums that I can ask to see if they need help researching their collections. And I feel like people from a humanities background can be really useful for natural history museums. And that's kind of my goal, is to not only get my own research done and be able to give this particular museum a little bit more background about their collection, but also to kind of establish this interdisciplinary field where natural history museums employ people from humanities backgrounds, especially to research their collections and to research their huge archives. And they have so much material that I feel like is not really used in any way right now. So the final thing that I want to do is write an opinion piece, because I have a very strong opinion about this nature and culture dualism within heritage that's kind of disappearing but kind of not, especially in museums and collections. So during my master's I researched this a lot, and I gained a very strong opinion, but I've also read a lot of opinions about this specific subject, and it's something that I feel like I have something to say about. And these are the kind of things that are easiest to write. So I'm going to write an opinion piece about museum collections and the role of nature and culture within them. And that's something that academic journals value as well, especially if it's a well-researched opinion piece that kind of puts different views on the matter together as well. So that's my final plan, is to kind of write something that I am very passionate about, because that's something that'll come easier. If you want to get something done, if you want to get something published, write about the things that you know, write about the things that you're passionate about. So the three things that I've talked about here is 1, networking, 2, finding blogs that you can write for that are just kind of easy to get into but you can work within your field, and 3 is actually getting something published, doing that through things you've already written something about, things that you are very passionate about, and starting your own research projects, because there is more room for them than you might think. So yeah, these are my plans for my PhD project, and I'll update you about every one of them somewhere in the future. I hope you enjoyed this and that it can be helpful in some way, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Species, or what